I always thought I'd seen every kind of trauma. House fires with families trapped on third floors, highway pileups with metal twisted like aluminum foil, even a kid who fell 3 stories and walked away with just a sprained ankle. But nothing prepared me for the night my marriage crashed straight into the ER waiting room. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday late fall. I was halfway through my shift as a firefighter paramedic, sitting in the Metropolitan General Hospital ER lobby, nursing a cup of burnt coffee from the ancient machine in the break room and praying Mrs. Jody Krakowski would stabilize. I'd just brought her in, 73 years old, caught up in a 3-car pileup on the expressway, fractured hip and possible internal bleeding. My crew had already cleared out, but I stayed back like I always did, to make sure she'd pull through. I had just pulled out my phone to text Skylar when the PA system crackled to life. All available personnel, 2 critical incoming, ETA 60 seconds, motor vehicle accident, possible DUI. I sighed, pocketed my phone, and stood to get out of the way. Another typical night, or so I thought. The automatic doors burst open with that familiar whoosh. The first gurney rushed in. Female in her mid-30s, unconscious and wearing a cervical collar, blood on her forehead. The paramedics were shouting vitals, BP dropping, possible concussion, airbag deployment. The second gurney rolled right behind. Male, similar age, groaning, chest trauma, semi-conscious, muttering something I couldn't make out. I stepped back against the wall, arms crossed, giving the ER staff room to work. Just another accident. Just another night. When the overhead lights hit the woman's face, I froze in shock. It was my wife. Still wearing the navy blazer I'd watched her button up that morning before she left for her late meeting. My brain short-circuited like a downed power line. Wait, what? Skylar? One of the nurses, Charlotte, a woman I'd worked dozens of calls with, glanced up and saw my face. She followed my stare to the gurney, then back to me. Her eyes widened. Jamal, she whispered. I couldn't answer. My mouth had gone dry. The lead doctor, Dr. Dwight Martin, barked orders. Get her to Trauma 2 stat. I need X-rays, CT of the head and neck, and a full panel. Move. Before I could process the betrayal punching through my chest, I turned to the second stretcher. The man groaning like his ribs were crushed, which, based on the bruising blooming across his torso, they might have been. He turned his head slightly, squinting under the harsh ER lights. And I recognized him, too. Spencer. Her ex-boyfriend. The guy from the photos she'd shown me years ago when we first started dating. The one she said ended badly, but never elaborated on. The man she swore she hadn't spoken to in 5 years. For 3 seconds, I just stood there like my boots were nailed to the floor. Then Charlotte grabbed my arm. Jamal, honey, maybe you should step outside. I'm fine, I said. My voice flat and robotic. Absolutely not fine. As they wheeled Skylar past me toward Trauma 2, her eyes fluttered open. She blinked up at the ceiling, disoriented, then her gaze drifted sideways and landed on me. Her face went sheet white. Then it crumbled. In pure horror and shame. Jamal, she rasped, barely audible. I said nothing. Just stared. Dr. Tyrese Wilkins appeared at my shoulder. Torres, you good? You look like you're about to pass out. I'm good, I lied. From Trauma 3, Spencer's voice echoed down the hall. Skylar? Sky, you okay? Talk to me, baby. Baby. Charlotte flinched. She looked at me like I might punch through the wall. Maybe I should have. Instead, I turned and walked toward the vending machines in the far corner of the lobby, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't get my wallet out of my pocket. Behind me, I heard one of the residents whisper, "Wait, is that his wife?" Another voice, "And the guy she was with?" Then silence. Then, "Oh damn." From Trauma 3, Spencer groaned louder. "Where's my phone? I need to call." "Your phone's in evidence," a nurse snapped. The car reeked of alcohol. "We're waiting on the cops." I leaned my forehead against the vending machine glass. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere, a monitor beeped steadily. Ambulance sirens wailed in the distance. And all I could think was, they were together. In a car. Coming from where? "Doctor." Martin's voice boomed from Trauma 2. "Pupils equal and reactive. Possible concussion. Let's get that CT ordered now." Skylar's voice, small and broken, rang out. "Is Jamal still here?" The attending nurse replied, telling her to focus on herself at the moment. I pushed off the vending machine and walked back toward the trauma bays. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear her explain. Maybe I wanted to see if Spencer would say something that would make sense of this nightmare. Or maybe I just needed to see it with my own eyes. Confirm that this wasn't some sleep-deprived hallucination. As I passed Trauma 3, Spencer turned his head toward the doorway. His eyes locked onto mine. He went pale. "Oh shit," he whispered. I stopped. Stared at him. 6 feet of bruised, guilty-looking ex-boyfriend strapped to a gurney. "Yeah," I said quietly. Charlotte appeared beside me again. "Jamal, seriously, you need to step away." "Were they coming from a hotel?" I asked, my voice too calm. She hesitated. Looked at the floor. The paramedics said, "Lakeview Inn. About 30 miles out." The room tilted. Lakeview Inn. I knew that place. Skylar and I had driven past it once on the way to her parents' house. She'd made a joke about how it looked like the kind of place people went to hide affairs. Funny. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Skylar's mom. Did Skylar make it home okay from her work event? She's not answering. Work event. I pocketed the phone without responding. From Trauma 2, Skylar's voice cracked. "Please, someone tell me if Jamal's still here." I turned and walked toward the exit. Past the nurse's station. Past the waiting families. Past the drunk guy handcuffed to a bench. Charlotte called after me. "Jamal, where are you going?" I stopped at the sliding doors. Looked back at her. "I don't know," I said. Then I stepped outside into the cold November air, still wearing my paramedic uniform with Torres stitched across the chest, and stood under the ambulance bay lights, trying to remember how to breathe. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could see the chaos of the ER, doctors running, nurses shouting, monitors flashing. And somewhere in that chaos were my wife and her ex-boyfriend. My name is Jamal Torres, by the way. I'm a 36-year-old firefighter paramedic, and until about 10 minutes ago, I thought my biggest problem tonight was whether Mrs. Washington's hip surgery would go smoothly. Now, my wife was on a gurney, and her ex was asking for his phone. This night shift was about to become the longest and most life-altering of my entire life. I lasted about 90 seconds outside before I turned around and walked back in. I told myself it was because I needed to check on Mrs. Washington. That was the lie I fed myself as I pushed through the sliding doors, past the registration desk, and back into the controlled chaos of the ER. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until I understood what the hell was happening. Charlotte intercepted me before I made it 5 steps into the lobby. She planted herself directly in my path, arms crossed, her face a mixture of concern and professional alarm. "Jamal, she said quietly. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm just checking on Mrs. Krakowski," I said, not meeting her eyes. "Bullshit." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Krakowski is in surgery. You know that. What you need to do is go home, call a friend, call somebody, but you can't stay here and watch this." I looked past her toward the trauma bays. Through the glass partition, I could see Dr. Martin adjusting Skylar's foreline. Her eyes were open now. She was awake. Were they in the same car? I heard myself ask. Charlotte hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Jamal. "Just tell me," I said. She exhaled slowly. "Yeah. Same vehicle. A silver Audi. Registered to a Spencer Malcolm. They were coming from Lakeview Inn," I finished. "I heard." She winced. "I'm sorry." I nodded. Didn't trust myself to say anything else. From Trauma 3, Spencer's voice drifted into the hallway, slurred and desperate. Skylar, you okay? Talk to me, Sky." Sky. He had a nickname for her. Charlotte saw my jaw tighten. "Jamal, please. Go home. You don't need to do this to yourself." But I was already moving past her, walking toward the observation window between the trauma bays. I stopped just outside Skylar's room, close enough to see but far enough to stay invisible. She was sitting up slightly now, the cervical collar still in place, an oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. Her blazer was cut open, revealing the hospital gown underneath. Blood had dried in her hairline. She looked small, fragile. Then her gaze drifted toward the window, and she saw me. Our eyes locked. For a moment, the entire ER seemed to go silent. No monitors beeping. No doctors shouting. Just the two of us, staring at each other through a pane of glass. Her face did something I'd never seen before. It crumbled. Like every muscle gave up at once. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tears spilled down her cheeks, smudging the dried blood. She mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips. "I'm sorry." I looked away. Dr. Tyrese Wilkins appeared beside me, chart in hand, coffee cup in the other. He followed my gaze into Trauma 2, then glanced at me. "Torres," he said carefully. "You good man?" "Yeah," I lied. He didn't look convinced. "You know her?" I didn't answer. He sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing. "That's your wife, isn't it?" I still said nothing. Tyrese let out a low whistle. "Damn." He flipped through the chart. Both patients came in together. Same vehicle. Car smelled like a distillery, according to the paramedics. We're running a tox screen now, but I'd bet money at least one of them was over the limit. My stomach turned. She doesn't drink and drive. "People do a lot of things we don't think they'll do," Tyrese said quietly. From Trauma 3, Spencer groaned louder. "Someone call Skylar's phone. Make sure she's okay." A nurse's voice, sharp and annoyed. "Sir, she's 10 feet away. She's fine. You need to stay still." "But I need to talk to her." "You'll talk to the police first," the nurse snapped. "They're on their way." Tyrese glanced at me. "You want to sit down? You're looking pretty pale." "I'm fine." "You keep saying that. I don't believe you." Charlotte reappeared, this time with a bottle of water. She pressed it into my hand. "Drink. Before you pass out and become my third patient tonight." I took the water but didn't open it. Through the glass, Skylar was crying harder now. Doctor. Martin was trying to calm her down, checking her vitals, asking her questions I couldn't hear. She kept shaking her head, tears streaming. Then she turned toward the window again. This time, she pressed her hand against the glass. I stood there, frozen, staring at her palm pressed flat against the partition. Charlotte touched my arm. Jamal, come on. Let's go outside. Just for a minute. I refused to go with her, and she said, "You're torturing yourself." I said no. My voice came out harder than I intended. She stepped back, hands raised. Okay. Okay. Doctor. Martin exited trauma 2, pulling off his gloves. He spotted me immediately, and his expression shifted, recognition, then something like pity. "Torres," he said, "didn't know you were still here." "How is she?" I asked. He glanced back at the trauma bay. "Stable. Concussion, some bruising, possible whiplash. We're running a full workup, but she'll be fine. Physically, anyway." He paused, then asked if I wanted them to keep the 2 patients separated. He could move one of them to a different wing if it would make things easier. I told him to do what he needed to do. I wasn't her doctor. I was just her husband. Or whatever that meant anymore. From trauma 3, Spencer's voice rose again, calling her name. Tyrese muttered something under his breath about wishing the guy would shut up. "Doctor." Martin looked between me and the trauma bay, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He suggested I take a seat, get some rest, maybe call someone to come be with me. But I didn't sit. And I didn't call anyone. I also didn't leave. Because if I left now, I'd never come back. And I needed answers. I needed to look her in the eye and hear her explain how we got here. How 5 years of marriage, 5 years of trust, had led to this moment. Her in a hospital bed, him in the next room, both of them reeking of alcohol and lies. So I stayed, leaning against the wall outside trauma 2, arms crossed, watching through the glass as my wife sobbed into her hands and her ex-boyfriend called her name from 10 feet away. Welcome to the longest shift of my life. I don't know how long I stood there. Time had stopped making sense. The clocks on the walls kept moving, the second hands ticking forward in their mechanical rhythm, but the numbers meant nothing. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like seconds. Eventually, my legs gave out and I sank into one of the plastic chairs in the hallway outside the trauma bays. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like insects. Somewhere down the hall, a baby was crying. A doctor was paging cardiology. The world kept turning, oblivious to the fact that mine had just stopped. I closed my eyes and tried to think. Tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. But every time I put the pieces together, they formed a picture I didn't want to look at. Skylar and Spencer, together in a car. Coming from a hotel late at night. Drunk. The facts were undeniable. The conclusion felt inevitable. But some small, stubborn part of me refused to believe it. Because this was Skylar. My Skylar. The woman who cried during romantic comedies and left me little notes in my lunchbox and called me at the end of every shift just to make sure I'd made it through okay. She wouldn't do this. She couldn't. Except she had. I heard footsteps approaching and looked up. Devante, one of my crew from Station 19, was walking toward me in his Navy uniform, radio clipped to his shoulder. He'd been on the call for Mrs. Krakowski. I'd forgotten he was still here. He stopped when he saw my face. His expression shifted from casual greeting to immediate concern. "Torres," he said slowly. "You good?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My throat had closed up. I tried again, managed to shake my head. Devontae glanced toward the trauma bays, then back at me. He sat down in the chair next to mine, the plastic creaking under his weight. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Just sat there, waiting. Finally, he asked what happened. His voice was quiet, careful, like he was defusing a bomb. I told him. Not everything. Just the basics. My wife and her ex. Same car. Same accident. Lakeview Inn. Devontae let out a long, slow breath. Damn, man. I'm sorry. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to say more. He sat with me in silence. That was one of the things I appreciated about Devontae. He knew when not to talk. He'd been a firefighter for 15 years, had seen enough trauma to know that sometimes words just made things worse. Inside Trauma 2, I could see Dr. Martin and 2 nurses working on Skylar. They'd moved her to a sitting position now, adjusting her checking her bandages. She looked more alert than before, though her face was still streaked with tears. In Trauma 3, the scene was more urgent. Spencer's vitals had been declining. I could hear the urgency in the voices, the clipped orders, the rapid footsteps. Dr. Wilkins was calling for a surgical consult. Something about internal bleeding. Possible splenic rupture. Part of me, the part that had spent 8 years saving lives, wanted to stand up and help. The other part, the part that had just watched my marriage collapse, wanted to watch him bleed out. I stayed in my chair. A nurse I didn't recognize hurried past, carrying a bag of blood products. Another followed with a crash cart. The energy in Trauma 3 had shifted from controlled to critical. Devontae noticed too. That the guy? He asked. Yeah. Hope they save him, Devontae said quietly. So you can kill him yourself later. Despite everything, I almost smiled. From inside Trauma 2, voices drifted into the hallway. Dr. Martin was asking Skylar questions about the accident. How fast were they going? Did she remember the impact? Had they been drinking? Her response was too quiet for me to hear, but I saw Dr. Martin's expression tighten. He made a note on her chart. Then another voice, one of the nurses. Were they drinking? The car reeked of it. Found an empty bottle in the back seat, another nurse replied. Looks like whiskey. The words hit me like a physical blow. An empty bottle of whiskey. In the back seat. I tried to picture it. Skylar and Spencer in that car, driving back from the Lakeview Inn. Drinking. Laughing maybe. Talking about what they'd just done. About me, probably. About how I had no idea. How easy it had been to fool the stupid firefighter who worked 60-hour weeks and trusted his wife without question. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jarring me back to reality. I pulled it out, squinting at the screen in the harsh hallway lights. A text from Skylar's mother. Did Skylar make it home safe from her work event? She's not answering her phone. Let me know when you hear from her. Love you both. Work event. I stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Work event. That's what she'd told her mother. That's what she'd told me too. A late meeting. Something boring and professional that didn't require explanation. The lie cut deeper than anything I'd seen tonight. Because it meant this wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a mistake made in a moment of weakness. This was planned and calculated. She'd built an alibi, covered her tracks, and made sure everyone would believe her. How long had this been going on? How many work events had there been? How many times had I kissed her goodbye and wished her luck, completely oblivious to where she was really going? I pocketed the phone without responding. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to explain that her daughter wasn't at a work event. That she was in a hospital bed 10 feet away from her ex-boyfriend after crashing his car on the way back from a motel. Devontae was watching me carefully. Bad news. Her mother, I said. My voice sounded hollow, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Asking if Skylar made it home safe from her work event. Devontae's jaw tightened. He didn't need me to explain what that meant. The layers of deception, the carefully constructed lies, the betrayal upon betrayal. Man, he said finally. I'm really sorry. I nodded. Because what else was there to say? Inside Trauma 3, an alarm started beeping. Spencer's blood pressure was dropping. Dr. Wilkins barked orders to the surgical team. They needed to get him to the OR now. No time to wait. Within seconds, they were wheeling him out, the gurney rattling down the hallway toward the elevators. Spencer's face was pale, his eyes half closed, an oxygen mask over his mouth. As they rushed past, he turned his head slightly, looking toward Trauma 2. Looking for Skylar. Even now. Even bleeding internally, being rushed to emergency surgery, possibly dying, he was looking for her. I wondered if he loved her. Or if this was just a game to him. A conquest. A way to win something he'd lost years ago. I wondered if it mattered. The gurney disappeared around the corner, and the hallway fell quiet again. Devontae stood, stretched, and checked his radio. His shift was ending soon. He needed to get back to the station. Before he left, he put a hand on my shoulder. You need anything, anything at all, you call me. Day or night. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. You understand. I nodded. Thanks, man. I mean it, Torres. Don't sit here and spiral by yourself. That's how people do stupid things. I won't. He didn't look convinced, but he left anyway. And I was alone again. Just me, the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the ghost of my marriage bleeding out on a hospital gurney. The commotion started about 20 minutes after Devontae left. At first, it was just raised voices near the ER entrance, the kind of disturbance that happened a dozen times a night in a place like this. Family members demanding updates. Drunk people arguing with security. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth paying attention to. But then the voices got louder. And closer. I looked up from my spot in the hallway just as a woman burst through the automatic doors like a hurricane making landfall. She was mid-30s, dressed in dark jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was flushed, mascara smudged under her eyes like she'd been crying, and she was holding her phone in one hand like a weapon. The receptionist at the front desk stood up immediately, hands raised in a calming gesture, trying to intercept her. But the woman brushed past her, eyes scanning the room wildly. "Where is he?" she demanded. Her voice carried across the entire waiting area, cutting through the ambient noise of monitors and conversations. "Where's Spencer Dawson? I know he's here. I've been calling him all night." Charlotte appeared from one of the exam rooms, moving quickly toward the commotion. Behind her, I saw Officer Troy Wallace, one of the hospital security guards, already moving to intervene. Troy was a big guy, 6'4", former military, the kind of presence that usually shut down disturbances before they escalated. But this woman wasn't backing down. "Ma'am," Troy said, his voice calm but firm. "I need you to lower your voice. This is a hospital." "I don't care," she shouted. "My boyfriend was in a car accident and he's not answering his phone. I know he's here. Someone tell me where he is." Boyfriend. The word hit me like ice water. I stood up from my chair, suddenly alert. Charlotte tried to redirect her, explaining that she couldn't give out patient information without proper identification, that she needed to calm down and provide some details so they could help her. But the woman wasn't listening. She was looking around frantically, trying to see past the reception desk into the trauma bays. "I know he's with her," she continued, her voice cracking now, rage bleeding into heartbreak. "I know he went to see that ex of his. He told me he was working late, but I checked his location. He was at that motel. That disgusting motel where people go to." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on something through the glass partition. I followed her gaze. She'd spotted Spencer. Or what was left of him before they'd wheeled him to surgery. The empty gurney was still visible in Trauma 3, the sheet stained with blood, the monitors still beeping in his absence. Her face went white. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then louder, "Spencer? Spencer!" Troy stepped in front of her, blocking her path, but she tried to push past him. "I need to see him. That's my boyfriend. Someone tell me if he's okay." Charlotte intercepted her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, please. He's in surgery right now. He had internal injuries and they needed to operate immediately. If you can just calm down and give us your information, we can." "Surgery?" The woman's voice broke. "Is he going to die? Oh God, is he going to die?" "They're doing everything they can," Charlotte said gently. "But I need you to breathe and take it easy." "Where's the other person?" the woman interrupted, her eyes wild now. "The person who was with him? Was it her? Was it Skylar?" My entire body went rigid at the sound of my wife's name. Charlotte hesitated, clearly unsure how much to reveal. "There was another passenger, yes, but—" "I knew it." The woman's voice pitched higher, oscillating between grief and fury. "I knew he was lying. He said they were done. He said he'd cut off contact. But he's been obsessed with her for months, checking her Facebook, talking about her, comparing me to her." She turned toward the trauma bays again, trying to see into Trauma 2 where Skylar was still being monitored. "Is she in there? Is that her?" I found myself moving forward before I realized what I was doing. Walking toward the commotion. Toward this woman who was falling apart in the middle of the ER, whose world was crashing down just like mine. Troy noticed me approaching and shot me a warning look, clearly concerned I was about to make a bad situation worse. But I ignored him. The woman, Spencer's girlfriend, turned as I got closer. Her eyes were red-rimmed, desperate, searching for someone to blame or someone to understand, or maybe both. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse now from shouting. I stopped a few feet away from her, my hands in my pockets, my voice flat when I finally answered. "I'm Skylar's husband." The hallway went quiet. Even the ambient noise of the ER seemed to fade for a moment. She stared at me, processing. Then something shifted in her expression. Not anger. Not blame. Something more like recognition. Like she was seeing someone who understood exactly what she was feeling. "He told me they were just friends," she said quietly, tears spilling down her cheeks again. "He said she was married and happy and that he'd moved on. He said I was imagining things." I nodded slowly. She told me she hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. We stood there, two people connected by the same betrayal, the same lies, the same man who'd apparently been playing both of us. Charlotte looked between us, clearly uncertain how to manage this situation. Troy had relaxed slightly, realizing this wasn't going to turn violent. The woman, I still didn't know her name, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm Kelly," she said. "Kelly Morrison. I've been dating Spencer for 8 months. And apparently I've been an idiot the entire time. Jamal Torres, I replied. Married to Skylar for 5 years. Same. Kelly let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. I couldn't argue with that. She looked toward Trauma 2 again, her expression hardening. Can I see her? Can I talk to her? Charlotte stepped in quickly. I don't think that's a good idea right now. She's still being evaluated. I'm not going to hurt her, Kelly said. I need to understand what happened. I need to know if this was real or if he was lying about that too. That made 2 of us. For the first time since I'd seen those gurneys roll through the doors, I felt something shift. A small crack in the solid wall of betrayal I'd been building. Because if Spencer had a girlfriend he'd apparently been lying to, then what exactly had been happening tonight? Was this an affair? Or something else? I looked at Kelly, this woman I'd never met before tonight, whose life had just imploded alongside mine. I don't know what's going on, I said quietly. But I'm going to find out. She nodded. Me too. And for the first time all night, I wasn't alone in my confusion. Whatever the truth was, whatever had really happened between Skylar and Spencer tonight, at least now there were 2 of us trying to piece it together. 2 of us demanding answers. The chaos of Kelly's arrival had barely settled when a new disturbance started, this one smaller but somehow more insidious. A buzzing sound. Persistent. Irritating. Coming from somewhere near the trauma bays. At first, nobody paid attention to it. The ER was full of sounds, monitors beeping, phones ringing, intercoms crackling. One more noise in the symphony of chaos didn't register as significant. But it kept going. Buzz. 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 Over and over, relentless, like an electronic mosquito that refused to die. Nurse Suzanne Davis, a veteran of the night shift with 15 years under her belt and absolutely zero patience for nonsense, was the first to track down the source. I watched her move through the hallway with the determined stride of someone who'd had enough of tonight already, which, considering the caliber of drama that had unfolded over the past few hours, was saying something. She disappeared into the storage area where they'd placed Spencer's belongings, wallet, keys, watch, phone, all sealed in clear plastic bags labeled with patient information and timestamps. Standard procedure for trauma patients, especially ones heading into surgery. The buzzing was coming from his phone. Suzanne pulled the bag off the shelf, holding it up to the light. Through the clear plastic, I could see the screen illuminating over and over. Message after message flooding in. The notification counter in the corner was climbing steadily. 15. 20. 25. Someone really wanted to reach Spencer Dawson. Suzanne squinted at the screen, trying to make out the caller ID through the plastic. Her expression shifted from irritation to something more like resignation. She turned toward Trauma 3, empty now, Spencer long gone to surgery, and then toward the nurse's station where Dr. Martin was reviewing charts. "Dr. Martin," she called out, her voice carrying down the hallway. "We've got a situation with a patient's phone in Trauma 3. It won't stop going off." Dr. Martin looked up, clearly distracted. "Just silence it and leave it with his belongings." "I would," Suzanne replied, "but the screen's showing, well, it's showing a lot of messages. All from someone labeled K." Kelly, standing next to me in the hallway, went rigid. "K," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's me. That's how he has me saved in his phone." She started moving toward Suzanne before I could stop her. Charlotte tried to intercept, but Kelly brushed past, focused entirely on that plastic bag and the phone inside it. "That's my boyfriend's phone," Kelly said, her voice shaking. "Those are my messages. I need to see it." Suzanne held the bag protectively against her chest, clearly uncertain about protocol in this increasingly bizarre situation. "Ma'am, I can't just hand over patient belongings." "I'm not asking you to open it," Kelly interrupted. Just hold it up. Let me see the screen. Please." Officer Troy Wallace had followed Kelly down the hallway, ready to intervene if necessary. But he paused when he saw the desperation on her face. This wasn't anger anymore. This was something raw and broken. Suzanne glanced at Troy, then at Dr. Martin, silently asking for guidance. Dr. Martin approached, taking in the scene, Kelly trembling and tearful, Suzanne holding the phone like evidence at a crime scene, and me standing just behind Kelly, watching everything unfold with a growing sense of dread. "What's going on?" Dr. Martin asked. "She says she's been messaging the patient," Suzanne explained. "The phone's been going off non-stop. All messages from Kay." Kelly's voice broke. "I've been calling him since 10 o'clock. He told me he was working late. I texted him to say be safe, to let me know when he got home. Then when he didn't respond, I checked his location." She stopped, swallowing hard. "And I saw where he really was. So I started calling. And calling. And he never answered." Dr. Martin looked at the phone in Suzanne's hands, then at Officer Wallace. "This might be evidence," Troy said quietly. "If we're looking at a DUI situation, and there's a question of distraction or impairment, the contents of his phone could be relevant to the investigation." Kelly's face crumpled. "Evidence? I just want to know if my boyfriend was cheating on me before he went into surgery and possibly died." The rawness of that statement hung in the air. Dr. Martin softened slightly. "Ms. Morrison, I understand this is difficult, but Officer Wallace is right. Until we know the full circumstances of the accident, we need to preserve the patient's belongings as they are. Can you at least tell me what the messages say?" Kelly asked desperately. "You can see them on the lock screen, right? Just tell me what they say." Suzanne looked at Dr. Martin, who hesitated, then gave a small nod. Suzanne held up the phone, still in its plastic bag, and read from the screen. Her voice was clinical, professional, but even she couldn't strip the emotion from the words. "Where are you?" Suzanne read. "Spencer, answer your phone. I know where you are. I know you're with her. How could you do this to me? If you're with Skylar right now, I swear to God." "Stop," Kelly whispered. "Please stop." But Suzanne kept going, scrolling slightly through the visible messages. "I trusted you. You said she was in the past. Answer me, you coward." She looked up. "There are about 30 more just like these." Kelly pressed her hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. "From trauma 2, I heard movement. Voices." I'd been so focused on Kelly and the phone that I hadn't noticed Skylar was awake and alert enough to hear what was happening in the hallway. Charlotte's voice drifted out, gentle but concerned. "Skylar, honey, you need to stay calm. Your blood pressure is spiking." "Kelly." Skylar's voice was weak, confused, but unmistakable. "Did someone say Kelly?" Everything stopped. Kelly's head snapped toward trauma 2. Her eyes went wide. "She knows my name," Kelly said slowly. "How does she know my name?" I was already moving toward trauma 2, drawn by the same question. Charlotte tried to block me at the curtain, but I gently moved her aside. I needed to see Skylar's face when she heard that name. I needed to see her reaction. Skylar was sitting up now, the cervical collar removed, and 4 in her arm, monitor leads attached to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw me standing in the doorway, she flinched like I'd struck her. "Jamal," she breathed. I didn't respond. Just stood there, waiting. Charlotte was checking Skylar's vitals, clearly concerned about the spike in heart rate and blood pressure. "Skylar, you need to breathe. Slow, deep breaths." "Is Kelly here?" Skylar asked, her voice panicked now. "Is she outside? Did she come here?" Charlotte exchanged a glance with me, unsure how to answer. I spoke, my voice flat and emotionless. "Spencer's girlfriend is here. She's been calling him all night. Apparently, she knew exactly where he was. Where you both were." Skylar closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Oh God. Oh God, no." "You know about her," I said. It wasn't a question. Skylar nodded, barely perceptible. "How long?" "Jamal, please," she begged. I repeated the question. "How long have you known Spencer had a girlfriend?" She opened her eyes, looking at me with something that might have been desperation or resignation or both. He told me she didn't exist." The words hung in the air, nonsensical and damning all at once. Charlotte paused mid-vitals check. "What?" "He said Kelly wasn't real," Skylar continued, her voice shaking. "He said he made her up. That it was a fake profile, a fake relationship to make me. She trailed off, dissolving into sobs. I stood there, just outside the curtain, processing what I'd just heard. Spencer told Skylar that his girlfriend wasn't real, that Kelly was somehow fabricated. Nothing about this made sense. In the hallway, Kelly had heard everything. She appeared in the doorway next to me, her face a mask of confusion and hurt. "He told you I didn't exist?" she asked, her voice hollow. "I'm standing right here. I'm real. We've been together for 8 months. I've met his parents. We went on vacation to Florida. I have the pictures on my phone." Skylar looked up at Kelly, seeing her for the first time. Another woman, another victim of whatever game Spencer had been playing. "I'm sorry," Skylar whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought you were part of his plan too." "Plan?" I interrupted. "What plan?" But Skylar was crying too hard to answer. Charlotte stepped between us, her hands raised. "Everyone needs to step back. This patient is still recovering from trauma, and this kind of stress could endanger her." "I need to understand what's happening," Kelly said, her voice breaking. "He told you I wasn't real? Why would he say that?" Skylar shook her head, unable or unwilling to explain further. She looked at me instead, her eyes pleading for something I couldn't give her. Understanding, maybe. Forgiveness. A chance to explain without judgment. I had none of those things to offer. Officer Wallace appeared behind Kelly and me, his presence a reminder that this was more than just personal drama. "I think we need to separate everyone and get statements," he said calmly. "This situation is getting complicated, and if there's a criminal investigation, we need to do this properly." Dr. Martin nodded in agreement. "Ms. Torres needs rest." "Her last name isn't Torres," I said quietly, surprising myself. "It's Skylar Bennett. She kept her maiden name." Another detail that suddenly felt significant. Another small distance between us that I'd never thought about before tonight. Charlotte gently ushered Kelly and me back into the hallway, away from Skylar's bedside. Kelly was still clutching her phone, still trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. "He told her I didn't exist," Kelly repeated, like saying it out loud might make it make sense. Why would he do that? What was he trying to accomplish? I had the same question. And beneath it, a darker one. If Spencer had lied to both of them about each other, what else had he lied about? What was really happening tonight at that motel? Kelly looked at me, and I saw my own confusion reflected back. Two people standing in a hospital hallway at 3 in the morning, surrounded by the wreckage of lies we'd both believed, trying to piece together a truth that seemed to shift every time we got close to it. "Something's wrong," Kelly said slowly. "This doesn't feel like an affair. This is something else." I nodded. Because she was right. This felt like something much worse than betrayal. This felt like a trap. 20 minutes later, they brought Spencer back from surgery. I didn't know what pulled me toward the recovery area. Morbid curiosity, maybe, or the desperate need for answers that only he could provide. Whatever it was, I found myself following the gurney as they wheeled him back to Trauma 3, Kelly walking beside me like we were connected by the same invisible thread of confusion and betrayal. Spencer was groggy from anesthesia, his face pale and drawn, a fresh bandage visible beneath his hospital gown where they'd repaired the internal damage. His eyes were half closed, unfocused, but he was conscious. Barely. Officer Wallace had positioned himself strategically near the doorway, arms crossed, watching everything with the careful attention of someone who'd started to suspect this was more than a routine DUI accident. When he saw Kelly and me approaching, he held up a hand. "Ms. Morrison, Mr. Torres, you can't be in here." "I need to talk to him," Kelly said, her voice steady now, hardened by the past hour of revelation and confusion. "Just 5 minutes. Please." Wallace considered this, glancing at Spencer's prone form, then back at Kelly. "5 minutes," he said finally. "But I'm staying in the room. And if he becomes unstable or the doctor says stop, we stop." "Understood." Kelly nodded. I stayed in the hallway, just outside the door, close enough to hear but far enough to avoid interfering. Charlotte shot me a warning look from across the hall, clearly worried about where this was heading, but she didn't stop me. Kelly stepped into the room, Officer Wallace behind her. The nurse adjusting Spencer's vitals gave her a questioning look, but said nothing. For a moment, Kelly just stood there, staring at the man she'd been dating for 8 months, the man who'd apparently been living multiple lies across multiple lives. "Spencer," she said quietly. His eyes fluttered open. It took him a few seconds to focus, and when he did, his expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like fear. "Kelly," he mumbled through the fog of pain medication. What are you doing here?" "You're kidding, right?" Her voice was trembling but controlled. "You told me you were working late. I tracked your phone to a motel 30 miles outside the city. You crashed your car with your ex-girlfriend in the passenger seat. And you want to know what I'm doing here?" Spencer closed his eyes, grimacing. Whether from physical pain or the conversation, I couldn't tell. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He opened his eyes again, glancing toward Officer Wallace, clearly aware that anything he said was being heard by law enforcement. "I was just helping Skylar with something," he said weakly. "She called me. Said she needed help. I went to meet her and—" "Stop lying to me." Kelly's voice cracked, the composure shattering. "I've listened to you lie for months. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I didn't notice?" Spencer flinched. "Notice what?" "That you've been obsessed with her." Kelly was crying now, but her voice didn't lose its edge. "You check her social media every single day, Spencer. Every day. I've watched you scroll through her Instagram at breakfast. I've heard you talk about her at parties. Skylar used to like this. Skylar was always good at that. You compare me to her constantly." From my position in the hallway, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the behavior of a man having an affair. This was something different. Something more calculating. Spencer's face had gone even paler. "I found the texts," she interrupted, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "The ones you thought you deleted. The ones to your friend Martin about getting money from your ex." Officer Wallace's entire demeanor changed. He stepped closer, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "Ms. Morrison," he said carefully, "what texts are you referring to?" Kelly swiped through her phone, then held it up. I couldn't see the screen from where I stood, but I could see Wallace's expression tighten as he read whatever was displayed there. Spencer tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "Those texts are out of context." Out of context. Kelly laughed bitterly. "You literally wrote, 'She'll pay anything to keep this quiet. Easiest 15 grand I've ever made.' What context makes that okay?" The hallway went silent. 15 grand. The pieces started falling into place with horrible clarity. Officer Wallace pulled out his own phone, taking photos of Kelly's screen. "Mr. Dawson, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are. I'm calling for backup and a detective. This is no longer just an accident investigation." Spencer's eyes widened, panic finally breaking through the medication haze. "I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else without a lawyer." "That's your right," Wallace said evenly, already speaking into his radio. "But you're not going anywhere until we sort this out." Kelly was staring at Spencer like she was seeing him for the first time. "You were blackmailing her," she whispered. "All those meetings, all those late nights, you were extorting money from Skylar." Spencer said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. I stood in the hallway, my hands gripping the doorframe so hard my knuckles went white. Everything I'd assumed about tonight, about Skylar, about Spencer, about what had happened between them, was collapsing. This wasn't an affair. This was extortion. Coercion. A crime. And Skylar. Skylar had been the victim. Kelly backed away from Spencer's bedside, her hand over her mouth, horror and disgust warring on her face. She turned and nearly ran into me as she exited the room. Our eyes met, and in that moment, we both understood. We'd been wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. "I need to talk to Skylar," Kelly said quietly. I nodded. "So do I." Officer Wallace's backup arrived within minutes. Officer Deborah Lois, a veteran detective with the kind of weathered expression that said she'd seen everything twice. She and Wallace split up immediately, Wallace staying with Spencer in Trauma 3, while Lois headed toward Trauma 2 where Skylar was still being monitored. I followed Lois without asking permission. Nobody tried to stop me. Maybe they understood that I'd earned the right to hear whatever was about to be said, or maybe they just didn't have the energy to fight me anymore. Either way, I found myself standing in the corner of Skylar's trauma bay as Officer Lois pulled up a chair and introduced herself. Skylar looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The confident woman who managed a team of 12 at her consulting firm, who negotiated six-figure contracts and commanded boardrooms, she was gone. In her place was someone broken and terrified, trembling beneath a thin hospital blanket. "Ms. Bennett," Lois said gently, "I need you to tell me what happened tonight. Everything. From the beginning." Skylar's eyes found mine across the room. I said nothing. Just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. She took a shaky breath and started talking. "If you're still watching at this point, thank you. Please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me how you're feeling about all of this. I'm reading every single one. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end because what happens next changes everything." Spencer had contacted her 6 months ago. A casual message on LinkedIn, friendly and innocent. Hey, saw your promotion announcement. Congrats. We should catch up sometime. She'd ignored it. Then came the Facebook message. Then the email. Each one a little more persistent. Then came the screenshots. He'd photoshopped text conversations between them, intimate messages, plans to meet, discussions about leaving me. None of it was real, but it looked real. Professional quality forgeries. He threatened to send them to me, to her boss, to her clients. He said he'd ruin her career, destroy her marriage, make sure everyone knew what kind of person she really was. Unless she paid him. It started with $5,000. Then another 5. Then 10. Each time, he promised it would be the last. Each time, it wasn't. I didn't know what to do, Skylar said, her voice barely above a whisper. If I told you, you might believe the screenshots. If I told my boss, I'd look guilty. Spencer knew exactly what he was doing. He knew how to trap me. She'd been draining her savings account, making excuses about investment opportunities and emergency expenses. She'd been meeting Spencer in parking lots, coffee shops, anywhere he demanded, handing over cash in exchange for his silence. Tonight was supposed to be the end. $5,000, the last of her accessible savings. She'd told Spencer it was over after this. No more money. No more threats. She was prepared to tell me everything, to deal with the consequences, to let the chips fall where they may. But Spencer wanted more. He always wanted more. When I said no, Skylar continued, tears streaming down her face, he got angry. We were in his car, parked at the motel. He said if I didn't pay, he'd send everything tonight. Right then. He pulled out his phone and started texting. I tried to grab it. He pushed me away. Then he started driving. Erratic. Fast. I begged him to slow down, to let me out. He was screaming that I'd ruined everything, that I owed him. She closed her eyes, reliving the moment. He was looking at his phone while he was driving. Texting someone, his friend, I think. Bragging about what he was doing. I reached for the wheel. Tried to stop him. And then we crashed. The room was silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Officer Lois made notes, her expression carefully neutral. And you never reported any of this? Never contacted the police? I was scared, Skylar whispered. I was so scared. And ashamed. I thought I could handle it myself. I stood there, processing everything I'd just heard. 6 months. 6 months of terror and isolation. 6 months of her facing this alone because she was afraid I wouldn't believe her. Afraid I'd think the worst. And I had. Tonight, I'd assumed the absolute worst about her without question. Officer Lois stood, touching Skylar's shoulder briefly. I need to coordinate with my partner. Don't go anywhere. She left, and for the first time all night, Skylar and I were alone. Jamal, she said softly. I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have trusted you. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hold on to the betrayal I'd felt just hours ago. But looking at her, really seeing her, all I felt was a crushing sense of failure. I was supposed to protect her. And I hadn't even known she needed protecting. Down the hall, I heard raised voices. Officer Wallace and Officer Lois were in Spencer's room. Kelly was there too, her voice cutting through the chaos. She was showing them her phone, pointing to the messages, providing evidence that Spencer had never intended to delete. Within minutes, the hallway filled with the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Spencer Dawson was under arrest for extortion, coercion, and assault. And my wife, my wife who I'd condemned without trial, was finally free. By the time the sun started rising, Skylar had been medically cleared. Dr. Martin signed off on her discharge paperwork with instructions to follow up with her primary care physician in 3 days, watch for signs of concussion, and rest. Rest. As if either of us would sleep any time soon. I helped her into a wheelchair, hospital policy, even though she insisted she could walk, and pushed her through the now quiet ER. The chaos of the night shift had settled into the eerie calm of early morning. A janitor mopped the floors. A lone resident charted at the nurse's station. The automatic doors whooshed open and closed as an ambulance delivered another patient to start someone else's nightmare. We didn't leave. Not yet. I found the hospital chapel on the 2nd floor, a small interfaith room with rows of simple wooden chairs, dim lighting, and stained glass windows that caught the first golden rays of dawn. It was the only quiet place in the entire building, the only space that felt separate from the trauma of the past 6 hours. I helped Skylar into one of the chairs. She moved slowly, stiffly, every bruise and laceration making itself known now that the adrenaline had worn off. I sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between us, close enough to talk, far enough to think. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Skylar started again from the beginning. Not for the police this time. For me. She walked me through every detail. The first message from Spencer, the escalating threats, the forged screenshots that looked so real she'd started doubting her own memory. The isolation of carrying this secret. The fear that dominated every waking moment. I was terrified you'd think I'd encouraged him somehow, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. That you'd wonder why he picked me, what I'd done to make him think I was vulnerable. I kept thinking, if I just handle this myself, if I just pay him and make him go away, Jamal never has to know. But it never ended. It just kept getting worse. She turned to look at me, her eyes red and swollen. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I thought I had to do this alone. I'm sorry for everything. I sat there, my emotions a storm I couldn't name. Relief that she hadn't betrayed me. Anger that she'd hidden something so serious. Guilt that my wife had been terrorized for 6 months and I'd been completely oblivious. Shame that my first instinct tonight had been suspicion instead of support. I don't know what to feel right now, I said finally, my voice rough. I'm relieved you didn't cheat. I'm angry you didn't tell me. I'm furious at myself for not noticing. I stopped, struggling to find words. I'm a mess, Sky. I know, she whispered. I am too. I reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. I don't want to lose you, I said. But I need time to process this. All of it. Can you give me that? She nodded, squeezing my hand. As much time as you need. One day at a time. One day at a time, she agreed. We sat there as the chapel filled with soft morning light, 2 people trying to find their way back to each other through the wreckage. Outside the chapel, I found Kelly waiting near the elevators, her coat pulled tight around her, her eyes hollow from exhaustion and revelation. When she saw me, she straightened. I'm heading out, she said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what Spencer did. To both of you. It's not your fault, I said. I know. But I still feel like I should have seen it. The signs were all there. She paused. For what it's worth, I broke up with him. Obviously. And I gave the police everything I had on my phone. Every text, every email, every weird conversation about Skylar that I dismissed as jealousy. I nodded. Thank you. For speaking up tonight. For having the courage to show those messages. Kelly pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, and handed it to me. "Put your number in. And Skylar's, if she's okay with it. I don't know why, but I feel like we're connected now. People who survived the same disaster." I added both our numbers and handed the phone back. "We are." She managed a weak smile. "Take care of each other, okay?" "We will." And she left. Another person wounded by Spencer, walking out into the dawn to start rebuilding. I returned to the chapel, to Skylar, to the uncertain road ahead. But at least we were walking it together. My shift had ended hours ago, but I stayed anyway. Stayed through the arrest, through the statements, through the slow unraveling of Spencer's carefully constructed web of lies. Stayed until there was nothing left to do but leave. As I walked out of Metropolitan General Hospital into the parking lot, the sun was just breaking over the horizon. Golden light spilled across the pavement, warm and clean, washing away the fluorescent pallor of the ER. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the morning air, feeling the weight of the night slowly lift from my shoulders. Somewhere inside, Skylar was resting in the chapel. Somewhere in police custody, Spencer was beginning to understand the consequences of his actions. And somewhere out there, Kelly was driving home to start the long process of healing. But I was here, standing in the light. 6 months later, the therapist's office had become a familiar territory. Tuesday evenings at 6, Skylar and I would sit on the comfortable gray couch, working through the debris of what Spencer had done to us and what we'd done to each other in the aftermath. Dr. Patience Vaughn was patient, insightful, and didn't let either of us hide behind our defenses. She'd helped me understand that being the stoic protector, the firefighter who saved everyone else but never asked for help himself, had created a dynamic where Skylar felt she couldn't burden me with her fears. And she'd helped Skylar understand that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was trust. We were rebuilding. Slowly and honestly. One conversation at a time. I'd learned to share my vulnerabilities, the calls that haunted me, the close calls that made me question my mortality, the fear that I wasn't enough. And Skylar had learned to let me in when she was struggling instead of shouldering everything alone. We weren't the same couple we'd been before that night. We were different. Maybe better. I still met Kelly for coffee every few weeks. She'd left her job, started therapy, and was rebuilding her life piece by piece. She'd testified against Spencer at his trial, her voice steady as she read those damning text messages aloud in court. Spencer had been sentenced to 3 years for extortion, coercion, and assault. 3 years that would give all of us time to heal without looking over our shoulders. You know what I realized? I said to Skylar one evening as we walked home from therapy. Being a protector isn't about shielding people from pain. It's about being present through it. She smiled, squeezing my hand. Dr. Vaughn would be proud of that insight. She's charging me enough for it, I said, and she laughed. That laugh, that easy, unguarded laugh, was worth everything. This morning, we're having breakfast at our kitchen table. Nothing special. Just scrambled eggs, coffee that's slightly too strong, and the Sunday paper spread between us. Skylar reads me a horoscope that's absurdly vague, something about embracing change and finding balance. We both laugh at how ridiculous it is, how it could apply to literally anyone. But here in this moment, it feels true anyway. We've embraced change. We're finding balance. The trauma of that night will always be part of our story. The betrayal I felt. The terror she endured. The moment we both realized how close we'd come to losing everything. But it's not the end of our story. It's just a chapter. We're writing the next one together. With honesty. With vulnerability. With a kind of partnership that can only be forged in fire. Skylar reaches across the table and takes my hand. "Thank you," she says quietly, "for staying, for believing me, for giving us a chance." I squeeze her hand back. Always. Outside, the sun rises on another day. Another chance. Another moment of hard-won peace. And we're here. Together. Still standing. If you believe that manipulation and extortion have no place in relationships, hit that subscribe button right now. Only people like Spencer, cowards who prey on fear and isolation, would scroll past this. Don't be like him. Subscribe if you stand against manipulators and abusers who use threats to control people they claim to care about. And if you believe victims deserve to be believed and supported, not judged, comment "I stand for truth." Don't side with people who blackmail and gaslight others. Show Spencer and everyone like him that their tactics don't work anymore. Your subscription and comment mean you refuse to let manipulators win. Be a part of the solution. See you in the next video.